Welcome to Red Barron Reviews, and today we're going to be taking a look at this little obscurity, the Enfield No. 2 Mark I tanker, and also the Webley Mark IV tanker, as they both share a lot in common. So this name is a little bit misleading, the tanker variant. And to get into that, we need to get into the history of this revolver. So between World War I and World War II, the British government wanted a smaller cartridge. They were fielding the .455 Webley, and they wanted something in a more manageable cartridge. So they went to Webley to develop this, and they ended up landing on the 38-200, which is very similar to a Smith & Wesson 38 short. Webley did the research and development. They already had some civilian production guns that met this criteria. They presented it to the government. The government liked it, and instead of awarding the contract to Webley, they took it to Enfield. And then you got the Enfield No. 2 revolver. Now, Webley was furious about this, so they sued. They won a little bit of money for their research and development, but they didn't get the contract they were after. The contract remained with Enfield up until World War II. When World War II got into full swing, Enfield couldn't keep up with the production, so Webley was called and they started producing the Mark IV, and they were issued side by side with the Enfield. Now, the tanker model is actually a very misleading name. So you would assume that these would have been issued to tank crews. I've also heard that they're issued to air crews because the shorter barrel made for a little handier revolver to have inside of confined spaces. This one, especially being a double action, would make even more sense if that was to be true. Here's the problem. I can't find anywhere where that was done in any number, was ordered specifically that way from the government, or that soldiers did this on their own. Now, that's not to say that that didn't happen. It's very possible that tank crew members, air crew members could have taken this to an armorer and he chopped the barrel and put a sight back on, but I find it highly unlikely. The only effort that I can see that the government ever went to make something more easy to use in those tight spaces was this double action only hammer. This allows it to be more snag free, but they did retain the longer barrel. So with that, where did the tanker model come from? Well, fast forward, after the war was over, these were imported in pretty large numbers in the 50s and 60s to the United States. Importers and retailers alike saw the influx of this, and they also saw an opportunity to make a little bit of money on a specialty model. When somebody hears that it's a specialty gun like a tank crew gun or an air crew gun, their minds start racing with all kinds of scenarios that could have happened. You see that with other firearms that really were specialty designed, like an artillery Luger or something like that, and I think that that's what the importers were trying to go after. I've also heard of these advertised as banker Webleys or Enfields and shopkeeper variants. But again, I've never seen where these were actually done by the government. So it's a little misleading on the name, but that's where it comes from. Now, how does that affect value? And that's the funny thing with these revolvers. Normally, when something's modified, even if it's done by an importer or a retailer, very rarely is it actually worth more than just leaving the gun in original condition. The thing with the Webleys and the Enfields, though, is that these were done in such small numbers, they actually demand a little bit higher premium in my experience and research that I've done. So just because you see this, and just because it was a civilian modification for a commercial market, doesn't make it worth any less. And in fact, it makes it worth a little bit more most of the time. So that's pretty cool. Another reason that I don't think it detracts from the value too much is that a lot of gangsters and mobsters back in the 50s and 60s, they really liked these because they were inexpensive. Ammunition was widely available. 38 Smith & Wesson was very prevalent. I mean, even today you can find it. It's not that hard to find. And so they almost have a second life or a second history after the war. So that adds a lot to it. Now with that, we'll go ahead and take a look at this revolver. So for those who don't know, this is a top load, top eject revolver. It's a break action, so you push down on this lever and break it open. Now here's the thing with the double action only variants. You have to actually fight the hammer when you break this open. So you'll see when I push down, I have to push hard enough to put pressure on the hammer to release this. If I had cartridges in here, they'd eject out. And then to load it, you just put your rounds in. During the war, they did have speed loaders. It doesn't seem like they were issued very much, and they're very difficult to find now. But they did have faster means of loading these. When you're ready to fire, you just close it, and you're back in action. So as far as revolvers go, it's pretty easy to load, unload, shoot. It's a very comfortable gun to shoot, and we'll go ahead and go to the range and let you guys see that now. First shots. All right, so we're back from the range. What are my impressions now that I put some rounds through this? Well, it's a ton of fun. 38-200, or in this case, I was shooting 38 Smith & Wesson shorts, has almost no recoil like you'd expect from an anemic cartridge, which makes this very pleasant to shoot. The sights on this are actually really nice, especially for a gun of this period. You have a very tall, serrated front sight. You have a notched out rear sight, and the notch is fairly deep, so it makes picking these sights up really easy. And the serrations helped out today. It was sunny and snowy, and I had no issues picking up my targets through the sights. Now, if you compare this to like a 1911 or a Smith & Wesson or Colt of that day, those sights are really pretty pitiful compared to these. So this really has some awesome sights going for it, even by modern standards. Unloading and loading, I had no issues. I was a little concerned that with this being as old as it is, that I'd have ejection issues, but I didn't. Each time I go to unload, all the brass will go flying like it's supposed to. No issues with that. No malfunctions while shooting modern ammo. Now the trigger. The trigger's not great, we'll put it like that. It is double action only, and in double action triggers, I really prefer something that has a very defined wall. And what I mean by that is, as you're pulling the trigger on most double action revolvers, it'll get to a point where the cylinder locks and it kind of hangs there. And that allows you to resettle your sights, do whatever you need to do, and then you pull through the wall and you're good. This is not that way. This trigger is probably about 14 pounds. If I had to put a number on it, it is pretty heavy, even for revolvers of that era. But it's got a lot of stacking. So stacking, stacking, break. Stacking, stacking, break. It's not the most consistent thing in the world. However, after putting a couple cylinders through it, I kind of figured how to time myself to make some accurate shots with this. And so it's just a training issue. But it's by no means as good as a Smith & Wesson or Colt trigger of the day. Now, that being said, it's also known a Gaunt trigger and double action. Those are horrible. But again, overall impressions, a ton of fun to shoot, really easy to shoot, and a really cool piece of history. If you're a guy that likes to research all the markings, this has a ton of them on it, all over the gun, both sides. It's even got them underneath the grips. So you could probably nail down pretty close as to where this came from. And if this gun could speak, I'd love to hear it talk. I mean, made in 1943, so you know it saw service. Came over to the United States, got chopped, and who knows, was this a mobster's gun or a gangster's gun? This just sit in a glove box or somebody's desk drawer? Who knows? But if it could speak, I'd love to hear what it has to say. And that's really the cool thing about these surplus guns. So if you guys have any questions, please feel free to leave a comment, and I'll do my best to answer you. Like, share, comment, subscribe, all those good things. It helps me out quite a bit. And as always, guys, stay free.